In the headlines, property owners warned against being underinsured this hurricane season. 240 individuals trained in emergency preparedness as the IOM continues to build capacity around the country. And financially strapped Liat loses an appeal against a $1.55 million in damages awarded to a former employee. I'm Andrea Louis with the Channel 5 News. Back with the details after this.
Here are some tips to reduce mosquito presence in and around your home. Keep water storage containers properly covered. Remove containers that can collect water from your surroundings. Keep garbage bins tightly covered. Pick up your litter and remove all tires from your yard. Keep gutters free of leaves and twigs to prevent stagnant water. Prevent Zika, dengue, and chikungunya. Fight the bite. This is a public service announcement from the Dominica Red Cross.
This message is supported by Flow.
Thank you for staying with us. First up, a 27-year-old insurance company is advising Dominicans to ensure all is in place for the 2019 hurricane season. Julian Morris reports.
Nagico Insurance began operations in Dominica in 1992, providing home, business and motor vehicle insurance and other services. General Manager Heather Reed says Hurricane Maria exposed several areas which the insurance company and its clients needed to address. Reed is encouraging those who are insured to keep in regular contact with the insurance companies to avoid a repeat of underpayment of claims.
One of the lessons that we've learned is that a lot of Dominicans were underinsured. They were not adequately covered. So there are instances where people have insured their buildings, and after a few years they extended their buildings and did not bother to inform the insurance company, and so you build almost like another building, but you only have a portion of that insured, and so you need to inform your insurance company, look, I have added on this piece, I have done this, and therefore my value has increased, so that you insure that particular one as well, in addition to what you already have.
Nagico's manager explains that following the hurricane, the cost of premiums have gone up. However, this has not been a deterrent to Dominicans, as the company has recorded an increase in clients since the storm.
Because of our fair and fast claim settlement, we have actually increased our clientele in Dominica. Prior to Maria, a long time before that, there were no claims, so insurance rates had fallen. After this, Maria, the reinsurance rates will definitely go up, will definitely increase, I should say, and this in turns we all have to pay, because from what we've been informed, 2017 was the worst year for natural disasters, and so the reinsurance companies will definitely increase their rates. In turn, that comes down to all of us to pay the rates.
Reed says the company has taken several steps to ensure its preparedness for the 2019 hurricane season, including the completion of its business continuity plan. Her advice to uninsured individuals this year is to invest in the service, as it can prove beneficial.
Insurance is very important, and we hear that all the time, but it does not make sense until it visits you, and I'll tell you why. If there's a natural disaster and you were to lose your property, can you afford to place yourself back in that position prior to the disaster? Most times the answer is no. Therefore, you take that little portion and just agree to pay that, so that in a situation like Maria, or there's earthquakes, there's tsunami, there's fire, you can get reimbursed.
According to Reed, Nagico Insurance has paid in excess of $750 million in claims for Hurricane Maria. Nagico says 95% of claims have been met.
In other top stories, Dominicans have been warned not to stray from the national goal of achieving climate resilience. Minister for Climate Resilience Joseph Isaac was addressing a recent national climate resilience consultation and warned the public that becoming climate resilient will not happen overnight.
First of all, in building climate resilience anywhere in the world, you must consider 4 major components. 1, financial resilience, environmental, which should focus on marine and ecological systems. Also, the physical aspect, that is building infrastructure networks and also housing. And finally, the human resource aspect or human resource development aspect. It will not happen one time. It's a process. But all of us here this morning have our role to play. And I ask you to join. I know most of us have already joined in the vision already, but join in the action of implementation.
Isaac urged Dominicans to have a hands-on approach in developing the country's resilience to natural disasters.
Everyone in Dominica should participate in planting a tree and ensuring that our environment is protected. We cannot treat it as if it is a thing on the side. It should be mainstream. When we travel, we look at other countries and we say, oh, Canada is so beautiful. See how many trees they have planted. See how clean the place is. Again, we can't build a resilient country if the environment is untidy. We have to ensure, again, that we clean our communities.
In other developments, a date has not yet been announced, but general elections are generally expected in 2020. With the anticipation building, it is normal for those seeking to be elected to make promises to electors. Businessman Parry Bellot believes it is also perfectly reasonable for voters to demand to know how these promises would be paid for.
All politicians are inclined to exaggerate the good things and to negate the things that they're not happy with or not working out too well. We have to expect that. We have to expect promises at election time. You have to look what is more realistic. One of the first things that every new government, in other words, you had a government, incumbent government, if they happen to lose election and a new government comes in, first they say, boy, you know, the treasury is empty. The last government just took out everything. So you have to expect that. You have to really think who is more likely to come close to meeting the promises that were made, because they will all promise the world.
Attorney General Levi Peter says in spite of claims of irregularities in Dominica's elections, there is no evidence of illegalities in elections which have been held over the past 4 decades. The Attorney General believes this is a credit to Dominica's democracy and electoral system and must be recognized and celebrated.
Notwithstanding the apocalyptic proclamations being made in some quarters regarding the claimed dire consequences of absence of electoral reform, the truth is that throughout the almost 41 years of Dominica's post-independence existence, Dominica, under the auspices of the Electoral Commission and the Electoral Office, has conducted and managed a number of general elections. To my mind, I believe 1980, 1985, 1990, 1995, 2000, 2008, 2009, and 2014. Earlier, we were told that it comes to 8, and I have no reason to quibble with that. These elections have been held, so far as I am aware, without a single recorded instance of actual as opposed to claimed fraud.
The Attorney General says the fact that the system has worked well is no basis to reject improvements and modernization. The AG says the delay is not because of an impasse, as some suggest, but the placing of the obstacles in the way of reform.
Obstacle is defined in the said Oxford dictionaries as meaning a thing that blocks one's way or prevents or hinders progress. That, in my view, is more akin to the reality of the situation that we are faced with in Dominica today. Indeed, some of those who have been and are placing the biggest obstacles in the way of these reforms are the same ones who have the temerity to claim that the government is impeding reform. The bills required to effect these reforms, namely the House of Assembly Elections Amendment Act and the Registration of Electors Amendment Act, are drafted and are ready to be tabled before Parliament, debated, passed and enacted at any time. Indeed, were it not for the orchestrated placing of obstacles to prevent or hinder their enactment, they would have long ago been law and the desired ID cards and accurate registry a reality today.
Mr. Peter says these bills have been reviewed and endorsed as fit for purpose by independent electoral experts and observers who have all urged their prompt enactment.
The Commonwealth Observer Mission stated this as follows: we recommend the Electoral Commission continue along its current pursuit of electoral legislative reform. And they said further, we therefore urge that the process is expeditiously completed and identification requirements to cast one's ballot be amended to require an elector to verify their identity using this card. The Organization of American States, the OAS Observer Mission, similarly stated, the mission exhorts the Dominican authorities to revise the legislation to require voters to use these cards to verify their identity as a prerequisite to casting their ballot. In my view, and as you will gather a little later from the true thoughts of a leading advocate in opposition to the amendment bills, there is no real impasse, but rather there is an unwillingness or a hesitancy to remove the obstacles that have been placed in the way of and are preventing the enactment of these bills.
The AG spoke at a panel discussion this week on the electoral process, the way forward, organized by the Electoral Commission, the Dominica State College and the UE Open Campus. You are watching the Channel 5 News. Stay tuned for more after the break.
Craft is a certain art that creates expression, and one of the things that we do as craft persons, we transfer that expression of self, that expression of value into our products. It's like coming from within, coming from everything that I have and feel, and then it comes out perfect.
Audio Jungle.
It's been over 18 years since I've been involved in craft. And it's all through experimenting with different materials, different products. I use a lot of vegetable tanned leather, which is the rawhide, to do my craft. And I get the opportunity to decorate it and to bring out my creation and my spirit within the craft. The work is generally handmade, and that is the unique and authentic thing about craft, is that there's your fingerprint, and a lot of people appreciate the fingerprint of the artist. One of the greatest joys is actually seeing a satisfied customer, especially for a unique piece, and they're like, yes, that is for me, and that is mine. That is really a joy. I am proud to be part and parcel of this big engine that fuels the island and the tourism industry. My name is Vanessa Lisa Winston, and I am happy that tourism is my business.
L'année tout partout. Attention si vous êtes homme et bien femme. Visitez place santé pour examiner corps. Ça c'est un nick pour yo ouais si l'année pièce moun au lion qui ni maladie TB et bien maladie sexuelle. En compagnie moun qui ni maladie HIV pe ni TB aussi. Savent qui l'année guérison pour TB. Ou ça vivre en bonne santé même si ou ni maladie HIV. Parlez by docteur. Prends responsabilité ou. Aidez du bout de maladie TB et HIV. Pour agir tout le monde pour examiner corps.
Welcome back. The chairman of the Electoral Commission maintains that the passage of draft legislation is required in order to facilitate electoral reform. Julian Morris has that story.
An injunction filed by the Concerned Citizens Movement has reportedly halted progress towards the creation of the legislative framework to facilitate the process. It was the view of the CCM that the proposed amendments would not be in keeping with the Constitution.
We need the legislation. That's the first basis. The legislation is fundamentally important. And the Electoral Commission will very soon address the suggestion that existing legislation allows us to utilize the system. The question of how do you deal with persons who may be eligible to remain on the list and who may reside overseas comes down to the fundamental question of the right to vote and the responsibility of the Electoral Commission to do everything in its power to ensure that everyone who is eligible to remain on the list have a reasonable and fair opportunity to so be enrolled in the system. And I remain of the view that we cannot get away from that. Any effort to get away from that, for one, in my view, may well result in litigation, and two, seriously affects the fundamental basis on which of our electoral system is based.
The Electoral Commission is charged with the responsibility of administering laws passed by Parliament.
Apart from the work which it has done over 40 years ago with respect to the making of the electoral laws, Parliament has had very little further input until the recent presentation of draft amending legislation intending to provide for the introduction of a system of voter identification and a mechanism for the verification of the electoral lists through the confirmation process. While the draft amendments to the House of Assembly Elections Act and the Registration of Elections Act have been around in various forms since 2017, Parliament has as yet not had the opportunity to consider them for reasons which we are all well aware.
Chairman of the Electoral Commission says there is not much that separates government and the opposition on the proposed draft amendments for electoral reform. He says the main area of contention is that of the proposed enrollment of eligible voters who may be resident overseas.
I must therefore, and I hope reasonably, conclude that save for this remaining point of contention, the draft legislation is considered by both sides of Parliament to be effective to allow for the introduction of an identification system for uniquely determining eligible electors, resulting in the issuance of an identification card to be used for voting. In a nutshell, it appears to me that there is bipartisan agreement that the proposed draft legislation and the system it proposes to introduce would be effective to provide identification system for voting in Dominica's election and provide a system for what is popularly termed cleaning up the list. If I am correct in this conclusion, then it seems to me that those entrusted by the people and by the Constitution with the responsibility for the peace, order, and good governance of Dominica are duty-bound to seek compromise, particularly where the issues which separate them appear to be rather narrow.
The Concerned Citizens Movement has denied statements that its injunction has halted progress on electoral reform. The CCM says its injunction does not prevent the Electoral Commission from sanitizing the voters' list and issuing ID cards, but the CCM is against the Electoral Commission's involvement in implementing a national ID card.
Psychosocial support and identifying gender-based violence were among the key areas of a capacity-building workshop by a United Nations humanitarian agency here. The International Organization for Migration, IOM, is continuing to build capacity within communities through the training of approximately 240 individuals for improved emergency preparedness around the island. Among the areas of training were first aid, fire safety, community emergency response, and CPR. Trained guidance counselor Thomas Holmes was a facilitator during the workshop and says it is important that people are trained in the area of psychosocial support in the event of a disaster.
We are getting people from different walks of life, different agencies, self-employed, government ministries, and other areas where we are providing them with skills, for example, for the psychosocial intervention. We are providing them with skills that they can use to help themselves, first of all, because I always maintain to them that you cannot give what you do not have. So you have to know the skills, how to use them, and use them properly and effectively. We want to give them skills that they can use in their families, in their communities, and their place of work.
The guidance counselor says psychosocial support has proven useful, especially in dealing with the trauma caused by a natural disaster.
We have had people helping each other, talking to them, listening to them, what they went through. That is what the psychosocial is all about. So in terms of disaster, or could be anything, you're traumatized about something that you need somebody just to talk to listen to you. So that is what we are providing the participants at this workshop.
Another of the sensitive yet critical topics is gender-based violence, a phenomenon that is not unusual following a natural disaster.
Gender-based violence is also an issue where we find many, especially of our female adults, they are molested, they are beaten, and all other things happen to them. And then we are trying to equip these participants so that they can go back in the communities, go back in the families, and then talk to the people who are affected or impacted negatively by those situations.
And a judge of the Superior Court of the United States Virgin Islands, USVI, has dismissed an appeal by the cash-strapped regional airline Liat against a U.S. $1.55 million in damages awarded to a former employee. Justice Douglas A. Brady, in his ruling, said that, open quote, the totality of the trial evidence was sufficient to permit a jury to conclude that Liat's stated reasons were false, close quote, when it dismissed William Cherubin. The judge also noted the airline, which is owned by several Caribbean governments, had, open quote, discharged Cherubin because of his age and in violation of the Virgin Islands Civil Rights Act, close quote. Justice Brady said in his ruling the court will deny Liat's renewed motion for judgment as a matter of law. He said, accordingly, the court will not interfere with the jury's award and Liat's motion for a new trial will be denied. Cherubin had taken the financially strapped airline to court in February, claiming he had been dismissed because of his age.
Here are some tips to reduce mosquito presence in and around your home. Keep water storage containers properly covered. Remove containers that can collect water from your surroundings. Keep garbage bins tightly covered. Pick up your litter and remove all tires from your yard. Keep gutters free of leaves and twigs to prevent stagnant water. Prevent Zika, dengue, and chikungunya. Fight the bite. This is a public service announcement from the Dominica Red Cross.
This message is supported by Flow.
To end the news, the headlines again. Property owners warned against being underinsured this hurricane season. 240 individuals trained in emergency preparedness as the IOM continues to build capacity around the country. And financially strapped Liat loses an appeal against a $1.55 million in damages awarded to a former employee. Feel free to contact us at news@marpin2k4.com. You can also access our past newscasts on our YouTube channel. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Andrea Louis, and to all of our viewers around the world, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful weekend.